The midday sun streamed through the glass skylight of Summit Innovation's main lobby, casting geometric patterns across the polished marble floors. Alexandra Reynolds, a woman in her early 30s wearing a tailored charcoal suit, stepped from the executive elevator with the practiced confidence of someone who owned every square inch of the building, which technically she did. Her gaze swept across the lobby, pausing on James Sullivan. He knelt beside a coffee spill near the reception desk, methodically working his mop in slow circles across the stone. The building hummed with Tuesday's quiet efficiency, executives striding toward glass-walled conference rooms, the distant ping of arriving elevators, the rustle of designer suits against leather briefcases. Alexandra walked toward him, heels clicking softly on marble. She stopped just close enough that he looked up, his hand stilling on the mop handle. Her voice came barely above a whisper, as if she feared hearing her own words. "I don't have a husband. Can I have a date with you tonight?" James froze, mop suspended midair, dripping onto the pristine floor. A flash of light cut through the moment, sharp, sudden, unmistakable. Someone had taken a photo, and from that second, everything changed. By 4 that afternoon, the image had spread through every department like wildfire through dry brush. The photo showed Alexandra Reynolds, CEO of a $700 million tech conglomerate, leaning toward a maintenance worker in the middle of the company lobby. The angle made it look intimate. The lighting made it look intentional. The caption accompanying it through internal emails and group chats made it look scandalous. James Sullivan's Brooklyn apartment was a study in organized simplicity. Children's books stacked neatly on worn shelves. Drawings pinned to the refrigerator with alphabet magnets. A collection of small, smooth rocks arranged on the windowsill, his daughter's treasures. He stood by the kitchen counter, staring at a photograph of a woman with laughing eyes and a bright smile. His wife, Sarah, gone 3 years now. The sudden screech of car brakes, the phone call, the hollow feeling that never quite left his chest, all compressed into this single framed image. Beside the photo sat an inhaler, its label bearing the name Sophie Sullivan, and a pharmaceutical sticker from Summit Pharmaceuticals. James ran his thumb across the logo, the same stylized S that adorned the building, where he now mopped floors and fixed broken things, a world away from the operating rooms where he'd once saved lives. "Daddy, is it story time yet?" 7-year-old Sophie padded into the kitchen in mismatched pajamas, dark curls framing a face so like her mother's, it sometimes caught James off guard. "Almost, Soph. Did you take your medicine?" She nodded, climbing onto a kitchen stool. "The one that helps me breathe better." James smiled, tucking a curl behind her ear. "That's the one. Why do you look sad, Daddy?" "Just thinking about work." "About the pretty lady who's the boss?" Sophie asked, her eyes wide with innocence. James stared at his daughter. "How do you know about her?" Sophie shrugged. "You said her name in your sleep." "Alexandra." The 42nd floor conference room of Summit Innovations offered panoramic views of Manhattan, though Alexandra Reynolds wasn't admiring the skyline. She stood at the window, back straight, watching Cameron Mitchell's reflection in the glass as he paced behind her. "The board is concerned, Alex," he said, straightening his Italian silk tie. At 45, Cameron had the polished sheen of old money and new ambition. 30 days until our IPO, and you're creating tabloid fodder with the janitor? Alexandra turned, her expression carefully neutral. "Maintenance engineer," she corrected, "and there's nothing between us." "That's not what the photo suggests." Cameron slid his tablet across the glass table, displaying the lobby image. "This doesn't inspire investor confidence. What would inspire confidence is focusing on the 20% operational cost reduction we need before going public," she countered, changing the subject. "That's what matters, not gossip." Cameron's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Everything matters during an IPO. You know that." He moved toward the door, then paused. "The board backed you after your father died, because Thomas wanted it that way. But sentiment only stretches so far. After he left, Alexandra sank into her chair, shoulders dropping slightly. The weight of Summit Innovations, her father's legacy, pressed down on her like a physical thing. Jessica Park slipped into the room, closing the door softly behind her. As CMO and Alexandra's oldest friend, she was the only person who saw behind the CEO facade. Cam's making moves, Jessica said without preamble. 3 board members had lunch with him yesterday. Alexandra nodded. He wants my job. He always has. Jessica paused. So the maintenance guy? That was real? Alexandra stared out at the city spread beneath them. He was the only person in this building who looked at me like I was just a person. James found Alexandra in the basement storage closet at the end of his shift. She stood framed in the doorway, still in her business attire but with her blazer slung over one arm and her carefully styled hair now slightly disheveled. I suppose we should talk, she said. James set down his toolbox. I suppose we should. What happened in the lobby was impulsive and complicated things for both of us, he finished. Alexandra stepped into the small space, closing the door behind her. Under the humming fluorescent light, she looked different, less the untouchable CEO, more a tired woman at the end of a long day. If we do this, James said quietly, we do it my way. Alexandra straightened. What does that mean? 3 rules. He counted on his fingers. No reporters, no talk about titles or positions. And if I feel like you're performing, like you're playing a role, I leave. No explanation. No second chance. She held his gaze. Fair. James nodded slowly. Then we can talk about it. As Alexandra turned to leave, she paused, her eyes landing on a small box wrapped in silver paper on the shelf. You never opened it, she observed. James followed her gaze to the Christmas gift labeled maintenance staff from AR. I wondered who left these, he said. Every year, something thoughtful. Gift cards, warm gloves, quality thermoses. Things no one else in the building would think to give. Maybe some people see more than you think, she replied softly. The company cafeteria at 9 p.m. was another world entirely. Overhead lights dimmed to energy-saving mode, casting long shadows across empty tables. The smell of industrial coffee lingered in the air, mixing with the faint scent of bleach from James's earlier cleaning shift. James arrived first, still in his work uniform, carrying a paper bag with 2 sandwiches from the deli 3 blocks away. Alexandra arrived 10 minutes later. She changed out of her business attire into simple jeans and a white button-down shirt. No jewelry except small silver earrings. No makeup beyond what might have been left from earlier in the day. You brought food, she said, smiling. A real smile. Not the practiced one he'd seen in company newsletters. Figured the vending machines might not cut it, James replied. They sat across from each other at a table near the window, overlooking the parking lot. Sodium lights painted the asphalt in pools of orange and shadow. A few scattered cars remained, security guards doing their rounds, cleaning crews finishing their shifts. Let's try something, Alexandra said after unwrapping her sandwich. 60 seconds. We each say something true, something we don't usually tell people. No judgment. No follow-up unless we want to give it. James raised an eyebrow. Is this a boardroom tactic? It's a desperation tactic, Alexandra said with unexpected honesty. I don't know how to do this, how to sit across from someone and not be the CEO. You go first. Alexandra took a deep breath. I'm terrified that everyone only sees my title, that if I lost this job tomorrow, no one would remember my name. They just remember the position. I'm scared I've built a life where I'm completely replaceable. The words hung between them, filled with the hum of refrigerators behind the serving line and the distant whoosh of the HVAC system cycling through its evening routine. My turn, James said. I'm scared people only see my uniform, that they think I'm stupid because I clean floors, that they assume I'm here because I couldn't do anything else. I'm terrified my daughter will grow up ashamed of what I do for a living. Do you think she will be? Alexandra asked. I don't know. Right now she thinks I'm a hero because I can fix anything that breaks. But she's 7. In a few years, she'll understand how the world works. And what do you see? James leaned back. A system that decided my value based on my job title before it ever met me. People who step over me in hallways. Executives who drop trash 3 feet from garbage cans because they know someone like me will pick it up. Tell me something else, Alexandra said, her eyes never leaving his face. What happened with your daughter? Sophie? James's hands stilled on his sandwich. He studied Alexandra's face with newfound suspicion. How do you know my daughter's name? Not yet, she whispered. Ask me again later. By morning, everything changed. Cameron Mitchell arranged for the security footage from the cafeteria to be accidentally leaked. The video showed Alexandra and James sitting together, talking intently across the small table. The angle through the window made it look clandestine. The late hour made it look inappropriate. The subject line on the company-wide email read, CEO's secret midnight meeting with staff. Alexandra was in her office reviewing quarterly projections when Jessica burst in, tablet in hand. Cameron's gone nuclear, she announced, showing Alexandra the video. The board's calling an emergency meeting at noon. Alexandra watched the footage, her expression hardening. He had me followed. This isn't just about you and the maintenance guy anymore. The IPO is in jeopardy. Carlyle Partners is threatening to pull out. Alexandra stood, smoothing her skirt with practiced calm. Then we'd better give the board something else to focus on. James was checking the building's utility meters when he discovered something odd. Summit Innovations was spending nearly 30% more on utilities than a building of its size should require. He'd been tracking the numbers casually for months as part of his job, but the pattern suddenly became clear. He noticed that cleaning crews worked scattered shifts, meaning lights and HVAC systems stayed on in different zones at different times. The building's equipment ran on overlapping schedules, drawing peak power during the most expensive rate hours. Conference rooms were heated and cooled to full occupancy standards, even when empty for days. James pulled out a notebook and started sketching a different system. A rotation schedule that consolidated maintenance shifts, allowing entire floors to go dark during off hours. A calendar that ran heavy equipment during low-rate periods. A smart thermostat protocol that adjusted temperatures based on actual room usage. He called it the EcoSync system, and according to his calculations, it could cut energy costs by at least 25%. The question was what to do with it. He was a janitor. Nobody asked janitors for efficiency proposals. His phone vibrated with a text from an unknown number. We need to talk. Parking garage, level 3. Now. Cameron Mitchell James found Cameron leaning against his Tesla in the dim light of the parking garage. Mr. Sullivan. Cameron's smile was all teeth. Or should I call you Dr. Sullivan? James stiffened. I don't use that title anymore. Former chief of cardiac surgery at New York Presbyterian. Impressive resume for someone who now cleans toilets. Cameron circled him slowly. What happened? Malpractice? Substance abuse? Must have been something serious to fall so far. What do you want? Cameron pulled an envelope from his jacket. $50,000. Cash. Take it and disappear. Find a new job in a different city. Alexandra Reynolds is using you to make some sort of point, and once she's made it, you'll be discarded. James stared at the envelope. You think I'm for sale? Everyone has a price, Cameron shrugged, especially single fathers with sick children. You know nothing about my daughter. Sophie Sullivan, age 7. Severe asthma requires medication costing $1,200 monthly. Your insurance barely covers half. Cameron's smile widened. I know everything about everyone in this building, Doctor. That night, James was awakened by the sound of wheezing. Sophie stood in his bedroom doorway, clutching her chest, her lips turning a terrifying shade of blue. Can't breathe. The emergency room at Brooklyn Methodist was brutally bright after the darkness of their nighttime drive. Doctors worked quickly, putting Sophie on oxygen while James filled out forms with trembling hands. 3 hours and 2 treatments later, she was sleeping peacefully, her breathing finally stabilized. James sat beside her bed, head in his hands, when a voice came from the doorway. "Is she going to be okay?" Alexandra stood there, looking nothing like a CEO in jeans and a rumpled sweater, her hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. "What are you doing here?" James demanded, keeping his voice low. "I have alerts set up for Sophie's medical records." "That's a violation of privacy laws, doctor-patient confidentiality, and probably half a dozen corporate ethics guidelines," Alexandra finished. "I know, but I needed to make sure she was all right." James wanted to be angry, but exhaustion had hollowed him out. "How long have you known? About me? About my past?" "Almost since you started at Summit." She moved into the room, stopping at the foot of Sophie's bed. "You're not as invisible as you think, James." Sophie stirred, eyes fluttering open. She looked at Alexandra with sleepy recognition. "You're the lady from Daddy's phone, the one he looks at when he thinks I'm not watching." James felt heat rise to his face. Alexandra smiled. "And you're the brave girl who gave the doctors a run for their money tonight." Sophie nodded solemnly. "My lungs don't always work right." "I know. My dad's heart didn't always work right either." "Did the doctors fix it?" Alexandra's eyes met James's over the hospital bed. "No, sweetheart. Sometimes even the best doctors can't fix everything." In that moment, James understood. "Thomas Reynolds," he said quietly. "Your father was my patient." Alexandra nodded. "The last surgery you performed before you quit medicine." "I've been watching you for years, you know," she continued softly. "Even before my father became your patient. I was in med school at Columbia when you presented your research on minimally invasive cardiac procedures. I was going to specialize in cardiology because of that lecture." James stared at her. "You were in medical school?" "Until my father's first heart attack. Then I dropped everything to help run the company." Alexandra's fingers traced the edge of Sophie's blanket. "I never went back. Summit became my life." The boardroom fell silent as Cameron Mitchell finished his presentation, the video of Alexandra and James in the cafeteria frozen on the large display screen. "This," Cameron said, his voice tight with barely controlled triumph, "is the kind of behavior that destroys shareholder confidence. It raises questions about judgment, about priorities, about whether our CEO is focused on running this company or on whatever this is." Alexandra sat at the head of the table, her expression unreadable. She'd learned years ago not to react in the first 3 seconds. "Count to 3, breathe, respond, don't react." But before she could speak, the conference room door opened. James walked in, still in his maintenance uniform, holding a thick binder. Every head turned toward him, Cameron's face flushed with anger. "I'm sorry to interrupt," James said calmly, "but I was told this meeting was about maintaining company standards." "This is a closed board meeting," Cameron snapped. "You need to leave." "I will, but first I'd like to say something." James set his binder on the table. "I'm the person in that video, and I'd like to clarify something. That wasn't a secret date. It was two people having an honest conversation in the only neutral space available." He opened the binder, revealing detailed diagrams and calculations. "While we were talking, I shared my observations about this building's energy consumption. Summit Innovations is wasting approximately 30% of its utility budget through inefficient scheduling and outdated systems." The board members leaned forward, their interest shifting from scandal to substance. "I've designed what I call the EcoSync system. James continued, turning pages of meticulous notes. By reorganizing maintenance schedules, consolidating energy usage to specific zones, and implementing smart controls, we can reduce operational costs by at least 25%. Susan Grant, a woman in her late 60s, and the company's original co-founder with Thomas Reynolds, put on her reading glasses to examine James's calculations. These figures are impressive, she said, and perfectly timed given our pre-IPO needs. Cameron attempted to regain control. This is irrelevant. We're discussing the CEO's inappropriate relationship with the one person who noticed we're hemorrhaging millions in preventable costs? Susan interrupted. I'd say that relationship seems quite appropriate, Cameron. Alexandra finally spoke. Mr. Sullivan has generously shared his expertise despite being consistently undervalued by this organization. I propose we implement a pilot program for the EcoSync system immediately, targeting the 20% cost reduction needed before our IPO. The vote was unanimous, with one abstention, Cameron. 3 weeks later, the EcoSync pilot program had reduced Summit's utility costs by an astonishing 27%. The media that had spent weeks mocking Alexandra's inappropriate relationship suddenly had a different story to cover, with headlines like, Janitor's Innovation Saves Tech Firm Millions and The Hidden Genius of Summit Innovations. Alexandra insisted that James present the EcoSync results himself at the next board meeting. He stood at the front of the conference room, walking 16 board members through his system with the calm confidence of someone who knew his work inside and out. When he finished, Alexandra spoke from her seat at the table's head. This is the person who made me reconsider how I run this company, not because he told me I was doing it wrong, but because he showed me what I wasn't seeing. Sometimes the most valuable perspective comes from the person who's been overlooked the longest. Cameron was noticeably absent from the meeting, but his influence was still felt. That evening, as James was checking the EcoSync monitors, he noticed several system overrides had been implemented, causing efficiency to drop dramatically in 2 zones. Setting up a hidden camera near the main control panel, James captured footage of Cameron deliberately sabotaging the system at 2 a.m. Further investigation revealed emails between Cameron and executives at Horizon Tech, Summit's main competitor, discussing a hostile takeover after Summit's IPO valuation dropped due to operational failures. The rain came down hard the night Alexandra found James in the lobby. It was late, after 10, and he was finishing his shift, running a final mop across the marble near the entrance. Water streaked the glass doors, distorting the streetlights outside into blurred halos. Alexandra walked out of the elevator, still in her work clothes, carrying her briefcase and looking more exhausted than he'd ever seen her. Long day? James asked. Long year. She set down her briefcase and leaned against the security desk. Can I tell you something? Always. She took a breath. 3 years ago, I was at a pharmacy at 11 hour at night. I'd just come from the hospital. My father had been admitted that morning with chest pains. The doctor, said it was stress, that he needed to slow down, but I knew he wouldn't. James's hand stilled on the mop handle. I was standing in line, numb, not really present, when I heard a man's voice at the counter ahead of me. Alexandra continued. He was trying to pay for an inhaler for his daughter. The pharmacist quoted him $200, and I watched him pull out his wallet and start counting credit cards. He had 3. He was trying to figure out if he could split the charge across them. James couldn't breathe. I stepped forward and paid, Alexandra said softly. I didn't think about it. I just did it. And when the man turned to thank me, I saw his eyes. Your eyes. I saw someone who'd been fighting for so long, he'd forgotten what it felt like to catch a break. I saw someone who would have done anything to save his daughter. Tears were running down James's face now, silent and unchecked. Why didn't you tell me before? Because I didn't want you to feel obligated. I didn't want you to say yes to dinner because you thought you owed me something. I wanted you to say yes because you wanted to. That was you, James whispered. You saved Sophie's life that night. No, you saved her life. I just paid for the medication. You're the one who's been showing up every day since then. The IPO was scheduled for Monday morning. On Sunday night, Alexandra called an emergency press conference with the entire board present. Financial analysts and technology reporters packed the Summit Innovations Auditorium, speculating about last-minute valuation changes or strategic partnerships. Alexandra took the podium, with James standing slightly behind her. Susan Grant sat in the front row, Cameron conspicuously absent. Thank you all for coming on such short notice, Alexandra began. Summit Innovations has always prided itself on integrity and innovation. Today, we're demonstrating both. She nodded to James, who stepped forward with a tablet. We've discovered evidence of corporate espionage and sabotage within our company, she continued, as gasps rippled through the room. Our chief financial officer, Cameron Mitchell, has been working with competitors to undermine Summit's valuation ahead of tomorrow's IPO. James displayed the security footage and emails on the large screen behind them. Alexandra explained that Cameron had been removed from the company and was under investigation by the SEC. In light of these events, we're moving forward with our IPO as planned, with full disclosure of these incidents to all investors. We believe transparency builds stronger companies than secrecy ever could. She paused, then continued with a new determination in her voice. I'm also announcing the creation of the Thomas Reynolds Foundation for Children's Healthcare Access. Summit Innovations will dedicate 5% of our annual profits to provide medication and treatment for children whose families struggle with healthcare costs. No parent should ever have to choose between paying rent and getting medicine for their child. The announcement drew applause, with several reporters immediately raising hands for questions. Alexandra fielded them with practiced ease, but her eyes kept finding James, standing quietly to the side of the stage. After the press conference, as reporters filed out, Susan approached Alexandra and James. Thomas would be proud, she said, squeezing Alexandra's hand, of both the CEO you've become and the person you've remained. She turned to James. And you, he'd have appreciated your honesty and ingenuity. He always said the best doctors were the ones who could see what others missed. I wasn't good enough to save him, James said quietly. No one was, Susan replied. His heart condition was far more advanced than anyone knew. He hid it for years, even from Alexandra. Like father, like daughter, James said, glancing at Alexandra. Hiding vulnerability seems to run in the family. 1 month later, the main lobby of Summit Innovations gleamed under afternoon light. James had just finished his shift, leaving the marble floors spotless. The building hummed with its usual rhythm, but something was different. Summit's stock had soared after the IPO, and Alexandra had launched a new initiative called SEEN, a program that encouraged ideas from employees at all levels. James had been offered the position of Director of Innovation, but had declined. Instead, he'd accepted a part-time consulting role, allowing him to return to medicine 2 days a week at a community clinic in Brooklyn, the first recipient of a grant from the Thomas Reynolds Foundation. Alexandra emerged from the executive elevator, carrying a small folding table and 2 chairs. She set them up in the center of the lobby, right where everything had started, and began arranging 2 simple place settings with real plates and silverware. What are you doing? James asked, approaching from the supply closet, still in his uniform. Setting a table, Alexandra replied without looking up. I can see that. Why? Alexandra straightened, her expression open and unguarded. Because we started something here. Because this lobby has seen every version of us. The awkward beginning, the photographed moment, the eco-sync diagrams we sketched at 2 a.m. in the morning. It feels right to come back here to do this properly. James walked toward her slowly. No reporters. No reporters. No talk about titles. Just Alexandra and James. He stopped across the table from her. Just a janitor and the woman who stopped to see him. And me. Sophie's voice rang out as she bounded from the elevator, clutching a drawing. Daddy said I could come to dinner too. Alexandra smiled, pulling out a third chair. I was hoping you would. Sophie placed her drawing on the table, a crayon masterpiece showing three figures holding hands in front of a tall building. It's us, she explained. The heart doctor, the building doctor, and me. Alexandra had ordered dinner from a small Italian restaurant nearby. Nothing fancy, just good pasta and fresh bread. They ate slowly, talking about Sophie's upcoming school play, about the company's new initiative, about the community clinic where James had started seeing patients again. I've been thinking about something, Alexandra said, setting down her fork, about what you said that first night in the cafeteria, about being scared Sophie would grow up ashamed of what you do. I remember. I don't think she will be. I think she'll grow up knowing her father is someone who sees problems and fixes them. Someone who treats people with dignity regardless of their title. Someone who taught a CEO that the most valuable lessons sometimes come from the people who've been invisible the longest. Alexandra paused. That's not something to be ashamed of. That's something to build a life around. James felt emotion tighten his throat. You've changed my life. No, you changed your own life. I just gave you a reason to show people what you're capable of. That's the same thing. Alexandra smiled. Maybe it is. They finished eating as the lobby lights dimmed automatically to their evening setting, one of the many energy-saving features of EcoSync. James helped Alexandra clear the table, folding chairs and stacking plates with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd been cleaning up after people his entire life. But this time felt different. This time, he was cleaning up after himself, after both of them, after a moment that belonged to them equally. Before they left, Alexandra handed James a small box. Inside was a stethoscope, engraved with his name. For when you're ready to fully return to medicine, she said, if you want to. James reached into his pocket and pulled out a smooth, round stone, one of Sophie's treasures. Sophie wanted you to have this. She says it's her lucky rock, the one she holds when she can't breathe. She says you don't need luck anymore because you have us instead. Alexandra closed her fingers around the stone, its smooth surface warm against her palm. Sophie looked up at them both, her small face serious in the dim light. Are we going to be a family now? James and Alexandra exchanged a glance, years of unspoken understanding passing between them. We already are, sweetheart, Alexandra said softly. A family isn't just about who lives in the same house. It's about who sees you when the rest of the world makes you feel invisible. And who helps you fix what's broken, James added, his hand finding Alexandra's across the table. Even the things you didn't know needed fixing, she finished. The lobby lights dimmed further, responding to the absence of movement, the EcoSync system doing its job perfectly. In the soft glow that remained, three silhouettes stood together, no longer invisible to each other or anyone else. Some things, James said, looking at the woman who had changed everything with a simple question in a marble lobby, don't need fixing at all. They just need to be seen for what they truly are. Alexandra smiled, the weight of titles and expectations finally lifting from her shoulders. I see you, James Sullivan. And I see you, Alexandra Reynolds. In a world that had taught them both to hide behind masks, of success, of failure, of pretended indifference, they had found the courage to stand revealed. And in that revelation, they had discovered something rare and precious, the gift of being truly seen,